Eleanor Prude had always been a reasonable woman. At 43, she prided herself on her ability to handle conflicts with grace and maturity. But as she stood at her kitchen window that Tuesday morning, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips, watching strangers in swimsuits unfolding lawn chairs in her backyard, reason began to abandon her. "What in the actual hell?" she whispered. The scene unfolding in her meticulously maintained backyard was surreal. A group of about a dozen people, none of whom she recognized, were setting up what appeared to be a full-blown pool party. Two men in polo shirts with the Sunnyside Estates logo were directing the placement of tables while several women arranged platters of food on them. Most alarming of all was the enormous above-ground pool being inflated in the center of her lawn directly atop her prized perennial garden. Eleanor set down her coffee with a clatter, sloshing the dark liquid onto the counter. She grabbed her phone, pulled up her calendar, and frantically scrolled through. No, she hadn't missed anything. There was absolutely no reason why her property should be hosting a pool party today, or ever, for that matter. She threw open her back door and marched across the patio, barefoot and still in her morning robe. "Excuse me." Her voice came out higher pitched than intended. "What exactly do you think you're doing on my property?" A tall, bronzed-haired man with carefully coiffed silver hair turned to face her. Eleanor recognized him immediately as Gregory Whitman, president of the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association, and the bane of her existence for the past 5 years. "Ah, Eleanor. Good morning." Gregory's smile was practiced and plastic. "I left you several messages about this. Our community center pool is undergoing emergency repairs, and we needed a suitable location for our annual summer splash event. And you chose my yard. Why?" Eleanor's words were clipped, her patience evaporating in the morning sun. "Your property has the ideal southeastern exposure, appropriate square footage, and grade-level access from the side gate." Gregory gestured as if explaining something to a particularly slow child. "As per Section 7, Paragraph C of the HOA agreement, community events take precedence during emergency relocations." Eleanor blinked, momentarily stunned. "That's for community shelters during natural disasters, Gregory, not pool parties." Gregory waved his hand dismissively. "The board voted unanimously last night. I sent you an email at 11 p.m. "An email at—" Eleanor stopped herself, taking a deep breath. "You can't just invade someone's private property with less than 12 hours' notice." "Actually, we can. Check your agreement." Gregory turned away, effectively dismissing her. "The party starts at noon. You're welcome to join us, of course." Caroline made her famous guacamole. Eleanor stood frozen, watching as workers continued to inflate the pool, the same pool that was currently flattening the dahlias she had spent 3 seasons cultivating. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "This isn't over," she said. But Gregory had already walked away, barking orders about the placement of the DJ booth. Eleanor retreated to her house, slamming the door behind her. This was the final straw in a long series of HOA overreaches. For 5 years, she had received citations for everything from the shade of her mailbox. Apparently, eggshell was acceptable, but cream was not, to the height of her grass, measured on one memorable occasion with an actual ruler by Gregory himself. As she paced her kitchen, anger bubbling inside her chest, Eleanor's gaze fell on the shopping bags in the corner. She had just returned from a toy drive shopping spree yesterday, including 15 dozen rubber ducks intended for the Children's Hospital charity event next month. A slow, mischievous smile spread across Eleanor's face as an idea began to form. If Gregory Whitman wanted to host a pool party in her yard, she would make sure it was a party no one would ever forget. It was time to fight back, and she had just the weapons. 180 bright yellow rubber ducks. Eleanor's mind raced as she closed her blinds and retreated to her home office. She needed a plan. One that would deliver a message without crossing any lines that could get her into legal trouble. The last thing she needed was to give Gregory ammunition for an actual lawsuit. She opened her laptop and pulled up the HOA agreement, scanning through the dense legalese for anything that might help her. After 20 minutes of searching, she found what she was looking for in Section 12, Paragraph E. Homeowners retain the right to access their property during community events, provided such access does not endanger or unreasonably disrupt said events. "Perfect," Eleanor muttered, a smile playing at her lips. She dialed her neighbor and closest ally, Diane John, who lived 3 doors down and had her own history with Gregory's regime. "They're doing what?" Diane's voice crackled through the phone after Eleanor explained the situation. "Setting up a pool party. In my yard. Right now," Eleanor confirmed. "That's insane. Even for Gregory." "Tell me about it." "Listen, I have a plan, but I need your help." "How quickly can you get here? And do you still have those inflatable flamingos from your daughter's birthday?" 30 minutes later, Diane slipped through Eleanor's front door carrying a tote bag bulging with inflatable pool toys. Her eyes widened at the sight of the mountain of rubber ducks Eleanor had dumped onto the living room floor. "That's a lot of ducks," Diane said, impressed. 180 to be exact. Eleanor was already sorting them into piles. "I've been thinking. The agreement says I can't unreasonably disrupt their event, but it doesn't say anything about reasonably enhancing it." Diane's face broke into a knowing grin. "And what's more reasonable than providing pool toys for a pool party?" "Exactly." Eleanor held up a duck. "Plus, I've been doing some research. Did you know that most above-ground pools have a water capacity of around 4,000 gallons? And these little guys," she squeezed a duck, which emitted a satisfying squeak, "displace about 8 cubic inches of water each." Diane raised an eyebrow. "So with enough ducks, we're going to create a yellow overflow situation." Eleanor laughed, the sound tinged with vengefulness. "But that's just phase 1. I've made some calls." By 11:30 a.m., Eleanor had changed into a floral sundress and oversized sunglasses. She stood in her living room surveying her arsenal: rubber ducks, inflatable flamingos, and several other surprises courtesy of Diane's teenage sons, who had been only too happy to contribute to what they called Operation Duck Dynasty. Through the window, she could see the party preparations were nearly complete. The massive blue pool dominated her yard, now filled almost to the brim with water. Tables laden with food lined the perimeter, and speakers had been set up, already blasting what Eleanor recognized as Gregory's preferred playlist of bland yacht rock. Guests were beginning to arrive, carrying towels and coolers. "Remember," Diane said, helping Eleanor load the first batch of ducks into a large beach bag, "we're just being neighborly, providing pool toys for a community event." "Of course," Eleanor nodded solemnly, though her eyes sparkled with mischief. "What kind of host would I be if I didn't contribute to the festivities in my own yard?" At precisely noon, as Gregory stood on Eleanor's patio making his opening remarks to about 30 swimsuit-clad neighbors, Eleanor emerged from her front door. Diane followed close behind, both of them carrying beach bags that clinked suspiciously with each step. "And so we thank you all for your understanding during this minor inconvenience at our community center pool," Gregory was saying. "We're fortunate that our very own Eleanor Pruitt has such a suitable property for our—" He faltered as he spotted Eleanor approaching. "Ah, Eleanor. So glad you decided to join us." Eleanor smiled sweetly as she made her way through the crowd. "I wouldn't miss it, Gregory. After all, it is my yard." She reached the edge of the pool where several people were already splashing around. With deliberate slowness, she opened her beach bag and pulled out a handful of bright yellow rubber ducks. "I brought some pool toys," she announced loudly. "Hope nobody minds." Before Gregory could respond, Eleanor gently tossed the ducks into the water. They bobbed cheerfully on the surface, looking utterly innocent and festive. Gregory's relief was palpable. "How thoughtful," he said, clearly having expected worse. Eleanor nodded pleasantly, then reached into her bag again. And again, and again. Duck after duck splashed into the pool, creating a growing armada of yellow that began to crowd the human swimmers. "Eleanor," Gregory's voice took on a warning tone. "That's plenty." "Oh, but I have so many more to share," Eleanor replied, her voice honey-sweet as she continued her duck deployment. "And as the property owner, I believe I have the right to contribute to the festivities. Section 12, paragraph E, wasn't it?" As the pool's surface began to disappear beneath a sea of yellow, Eleanor caught Diane's eye. Her friend gave an imperceptible nod, then slipped away toward the side gate. Phase 1 was complete. Phase 2 was about to begin, and Gregory Whitman had no idea what was coming. Gregory's face had progressed through several interesting shades of red as more and more ducks filled the pool. By the time Eleanor reached the bottom of her first beach bag, the water was a vibrant mosaic of yellow rubber, with swimmers awkwardly paddling through gaps in the duck armada. "This is ridiculous," Gregory hissed, his perfectly white teeth clenched in a grimace that resembled a smile only if you squinted. "You're deliberately disrupting the event." "Disrupting?" Eleanor widened her eyes in exaggerated innocence. "I'm just providing pool toys, Gregory. It specifically says in the HOA agreement that I'm allowed to access my property during community events. Unless you're suggesting that the party you organize without my proper consent is somehow more important than my right to use my own backyard." Several nearby guests shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. Eleanor noted with satisfaction that not everyone seemed thrilled with Gregory's commandeering of her property. "Besides," she continued, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by those closest to them, "I thought community events were supposed to be authorized by a majority vote after proper notice, not emergency emails at 11 p.m. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Gregory's smile grew more strained. "We had an emergency situation, Eleanor, as I explained. The community center pool. Yes, I heard about the algae problem." Eleanor cut in smoothly. "Fascinating how that happened right after you were warned about violating the county's chemical treatment regulations." Gregory's jaw tightened. That's completely unrelated. Is it? Eleanor raised an eyebrow above her sunglasses. Just like it's completely unrelated that my yard was chosen after I filed that complaint about your unapproved gazebo extension last month. More murmurs. Gregory's wife Caroline approached, her expression concerned as she sensed the growing tension. Gregory, perhaps we should. The sound of a loudspeaker cut through the conversation. Attention, side states where is IDNTIS. All heads turned toward the side gate, where Diane stood with what appeared to be a bullhorn. Behind her was a news van from the local station, KBXR, and a reporter Eleanor recognized as Melissa Chen, known for her investigative pieces on community issues. What the hell? Gregory muttered. I'd like to welcome Channel 12 News, who are doing a special feature on HOA overreach in suburban America, Diane announced cheerfully through the bullhorn. They were very interested in today's event. The reporter stepped forward with the cameraman in tow. We received an anonymous tip about an unauthorized pool party being held on private property, Melissa Chen explained, her professional smile firmly in place. Would anyone care to comment on how this event came to be hosted on Ms. Pruitt's lawn without proper notice or consent? Eleanor suppressed a smile as she watched Gregory's face cycle through expressions, shock, anger, panic, and finally, a tight-lipped attempt at damage control. There's been a misunderstanding, he said, stepping forward with his arms spread in a placating gesture. This is a fully authorized community event during an emergency situation. Authorized by whom? The reporter asked, microphone extended. By the HOA board of which I am president. And when was this authorization given? Gregory hesitated. Last night during an emergency session. Less than 24 hours before the event. The reporter looked intrigued. Is that standard procedure for your HOA? While Gregory floundered, Eleanor slipped away to the edge of the pool, where she continued methodically adding ducks from her second beach bag. The rubber armada now covered nearly 70% of the water's surface, with swimmers either retreating to the edges or awkwardly trying to create duck-free zones by pushing the toys aside, only to have them float back immediately. The water level was visibly rising, lapping dangerously close to the pool's edge. Physics was on Eleanor's side. Each duck displaced more water, forcing the pool closer to overflow with every addition. From the corner of her eye, Eleanor spotted several neighbors she knew had their own grievances with Gregory's reign. Tracy Mendez, who had been fined for planting unauthorized native wildflowers, Sam Washington, whose request to install solar panels had been repeatedly denied, the Rodriguez family, who'd fought a 6-month battle over the color of their front door. All of them were watching the unfolding scene with barely concealed delight. Eleanor caught Tracy's eye and gave a slight nod. Tracy grinned and discreetly passed a message to Sam, who whispered to Mrs. Rodriguez. One by one, they began to approach Eleanor, each carrying something in hand. I brought some pool toys too, Tracy said loudly, pulling out a collection of inflatable sea creatures from her tote bag. Hope that's okay. And I have these beach balls, Sam added, producing half a dozen colorful inflatables. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived with an enormous inflatable unicorn. My daughter insisted we contribute this to the party, she said, her eyes twinkling. One by one, more neighbors approached with their own contributions, a quiet rebellion joining Eleanor's duck revolution. The pool's surface disappeared further under a riot of colorful plastic, the water level creeping higher with each addition. Gregory, still tangled in the reporter's questions about HOA procedures and resident notification protocols, finally noticed what was happening at the pool. His eyes widened in horror. Stop that immediately, he shouted, abandoning the interview mid-sentence. You're going to. He never finished his sentence. At that precise moment, the Rodriguez family's teenage son accidentally cannonballed into the pool, sending a wave of water, and at least 30 rubber ducks, sloshing over the edge and across Eleanor's lawn. The first breach had occurred, and Eleanor couldn't have scripted it better herself. Water began to trickle over other sections of the pool's edge, carrying ducks and inflatable toys onto the grass. Guests scrambled back, some laughing, others looking annoyed as their shoes and belongings got wet. Oh dear, Eleanor said, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by the news crew. It seems there might be too many people in my pool. I hope this doesn't damage my lawn that the HOA is so strict about maintaining to their standards. The camera panned to Gregory, whose face had gone from red to an alarming shade of purple. Phase 2 was complete. The news crew was documenting everything. Now it was time for Phase 3, and Eleanor had saved the best for last. As water continued to slosh over the pool's edges, creating miniature rivers across Eleanor's lawn, Gregory went into full crisis management mode. He dispatched several board members to try controlling the overflow while simultaneously attempting to usher the news crew off the property. This is private property, he insisted to Melissa Chen, who looked thoroughly amused by the chaos unfolding around them. Yes, it is, the reporter agreed pleasantly. Miss Pruitt's private property, who has graciously allowed us to document this community event. Isn't that right, Miss Pruitt? Eleanor nodded serenely. Absolutely. Freedom of the press is so important, don't you think, Gregory? The reporter turned back to Gregory. Mr. Whitman, many residents have told us off-camera that this isn't the first time the HOA has made unilateral decisions without proper consultation. Would you care to address those concerns? Gregory's smile was so tight it looked painful. I'm afraid I have a situation to manage right now. Perhaps we could schedule an interview for another time. Of course, Melissa replied. We'll be running a 3-part special on HOA governance next week. I'm sure our viewers would love to hear your perspective. As Gregory retreated, Eleanor caught Diane's eye and gave a subtle nod. Time for phase 3. Diane casually made her way to the buffet table, phone in hand, seemingly texting. Eleanor watched the side gate, pretending to be absorbed in directing the placement of even more ducks into the increasingly crowded pool. 3 minutes later, precisely on schedule, a bright yellow food truck emblazoned with QACKERs, GORMED Duck CONFIT, pulled up outside Eleanor's side gate. The driver honked twice, a duck call horn that quacked instead of honking, and began unloading equipment. What now? Gregory muttered, striding toward the new disruption. The food truck's side window opened, revealing a cheerful young chef in a yellow apron decorated with, what else? Rubber ducks. Delivery for the Sunnyside Estates Summer Splash, he announced loudly. We've got duck confit sliders, duck fat fries, and our special rubber ducky cupcakes for dessert. Gregory reached the gate, his composure finally cracking. We did not order this. The chef checked his tablet. Order placed by Eleanor Pruitt, paid in full, including a very generous tip. He looked around. Is there a problem? There certainly is, Gregory sputtered. This is an unauthorized. Actually, Eleanor interrupted, approaching with her HOA agreement in hand. Section 15, paragraph B clearly states that homeowners may arrange for catering at any event held on their property, provided health codes are observed. And since this event is indeed on my property, she smiled sweetly at the chef. Please set up wherever is convenient. I'm sure our guests are getting hungry. The chef grinned and began wheeling in his equipment. The fragrant aroma of duck confit soon filled the air, drawing curious and hungry guests away from the chaotic pool scene. Gregory stared at Eleanor, comprehension finally dawning in his eyes. You planned all of this. Planned what? Eleanor blinked innocently. Providing pool toys for a pool party? Arranging food for guests in my yard? Being a good host seems like the least I could do given the circumstances. As if on cue, there was another commotion at the front of Eleanor's house. The unmistakable sound of quacking, real live quacking, filled the air. Gregory's head snapped toward the noise. What the hell is that? Oh, Eleanor clapped her hands in delight. That must be the petting zoo. The what? Before Eleanor could explain, 6 runners in bright yellow t-shirts appeared, jogging in perfect formation down the street toward her house. Each carried a large banner that together spelled out Donald's dash for CHRITE. Behind them came a crowd of about 50 people, all wearing the same yellow shirts and rubber duck hats, many pushing strollers or holding the hands of excited children. Leading them was a man in a full-body duck costume, complete with orange bill and feet. What is happening? Gregory's voice had risen to a near shriek. It's the annual Duck Dash, Eleanor explained calmly. A 5K charity run for the Children's Hospital. Didn't you see the permit notification? It went out to all residents last month. A race. Through your yard? Oh, goodness no, Eleanor laughed. They're just using my front yard as the finish line and celebration area. The county approved it weeks ago. She waived the permit she obtained, legitimately, just yesterday after calling in several favors from her friend at the Parks Department. But, Gregory struggled to form coherent thoughts as his perfectly planned pool party disintegrated around him. The Duck Dash participants began gathering on Eleanor's front lawn, setting up water stations and a small stage for the awards ceremony. Children ran excitedly toward the backyard, drawn by the sight of the pool filled with rubber ducks, their actual, real-life mascot made manifest in hundreds of floating toys. Ms. Pruitt, the duck-costumed man approached, his voice muffled inside his costumed head. Thank you so much for letting us use your property for the finish line celebration. The kids are thrilled about the duck-themed pool display. What an amazing visual. Happy to help. Eleanor replied warmly, acutely aware of Gregory seething beside her and the news camera capturing every moment. The Children's Hospital is such an important cause. In fact, all those rubber ducks were originally purchased for the hospital's annual fundraiser. We'll be sure to collect them after the celebration, the duck man assured her. They'll be sanitized and donated to the children as planned. Perfect. Eleanor beamed. The news reporter approached, microphone in hand. Ms. Pruitt, can you tell us about your involvement with the Duck Dash charity event? Well, I supported the Children's Hospital for years, Eleanor explained, ever since my nephew was treated there for leukemia. When I learned the HOA was planning this pool party in my yard today, I thought, why not make it a joint event? That way we could turn this unexpected situation into something positive for the community. The reporter nodded appreciatively, then turned to Gregory. Mr. Whitman, was the HOA aware of this charity event coinciding with your pool party? Gregory's mouth opened and closed several times before he managed to speak. This was not. We didn't. Eleanor placed a sympathetic hand on his arm. I'm sure it slipped Gregory's mind with all the emergency planning for the pool party. These things happen when decisions are made hastily without proper consultation. The camera zoomed in on Gregory's face, capturing his expression for posterity as he realized he had been outmaneuvered on every front. Around them, Eleanor's yard had transformed into a perfect storm of chaos. A pool overflowing with rubber ducks and inflatable toys, HOA members frantically trying to contain the water, a duck confit food truck serving eager guests, charity runners in duck costumes celebrating on her front lawn, excited children darting between adults, and a news crew documenting it all. And in the center stood Eleanor, serene in her floral sundress and oversized sunglasses, the picture of innocent hospitality as her meticulously planned revenge played out exactly as intended. By late afternoon, the Sunnyside Estates HOA pool party had officially been absorbed by the Duck Dash charity event. Most of the original party guests had either retreated in confusion or enthusiastically joined the charity celebration, many now sporting yellow duck hats purchased from the fundraising booth that had mysteriously appeared on Eleanor's driveway. Gregory Whitman sat alone on a lawn chair at the edge of Eleanor's property, his once pristine polo shirt splattered with water and his carefully coiffed silver hair disheveled. He watched with hollow eyes as the spectacle continued to unfold, occasionally checking his phone where messages from other HOA board members were piling up. Eleanor, meanwhile, had fully embraced her role as the gracious host of the charity event. She stood on the small stage that had been set up, microphone in hand, announcing the winners of the Duck Dash while children cheered. And finally, a special thank you to the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association, she said, her voice carrying across the crowded yard, for so generously co-hosting this wonderful community event. Let's give a big round of applause to HOA President Gregory Whitman for his unexpected but much appreciated support. The crowd erupted in applause, many not realizing the delicious irony of the situation. The KBXR news crew zoomed in on Gregory, who managed a weak wave, trapped by social convention, into acknowledging the gratitude for something he had never agreed to. After the awards ceremony, Eleanor made her way through the crowd, accepting thanks and congratulations from neighbors and Duck Dash participants alike. When she reached Gregory, she sat down in the empty chair beside him. For a long moment, neither spoke, just watching the scene before them. Volunteers were beginning to collect the rubber ducks from the now half-drained pool, children were helping count them for donation to the hospital, and Diane was directing the Duck Dash cleanup crew with military precision. You won, Gregory finally said, his voice low and defeated. Eleanor sipped her lemonade thoughtfully. I didn't realize it was a competition. Don't play innocent, Eleanor. This was all deliberate. About as deliberate as choosing my yard for your pool party after I filed that complaint about your gazebo, she replied calmly. Gregory sighed at the fight gone out of him. How did you organize all this so quickly? I didn't organize everything, Eleanor admitted. The Duck Dash was already scheduled for today, just not at my house. When I explained the situation to the organizers this morning, they were more than happy to reroute the finish line. As for the rest, she smiled. Let's just say a lot of people in this neighborhood have been waiting for an opportunity to push back against some of the HOA's more arbitrary decisions. Gregory was quiet for a moment. The board meeting next week is going to be unpleasant. I imagine it will, Eleanor agreed. Especially since at least 3 of your board members have already told me they'll be supporting my motion to revise the emergency authorization procedures. He looked at her sharply. You're going to the meeting. Of course. I've been to every meeting for 5 years, Gregory. You just never listen to anything I say. She stood, brushing off her sundress. Maybe now you will. As Eleanor walked away, her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Channel 12 wants to interview you for their HOA special as a community leader who found an innovative solution to an HOA conflict. You free Tuesday. Eleanor smiled, typing back, Perfect. I'll bring the rubber duck for their set. By early evening, most of the crowd had dispersed. The pool had been drained, the ducks collected and loaded into a van for cleaning before their donation to the Children's Hospital. The food truck had sold out completely, with a portion of the proceeds going to the charity. The Duck Dash organizers had dismantled their stage and finish line, leaving Eleanor's front yard remarkably tidy. In her backyard, however, the impact was more visible. Her lawn was soggy and trampled in places, and her poor flattened dahlias wouldn't recover this season. But as Eleanor surveyed the damage, she found she didn't mind as much as she'd expected. Sometimes you had to sacrifice a few flowers to make a point. Diane joined her, handing her a glass of wine. To successful revolutions, she toasted. Eleanor clinked glasses with her. One battle doesn't win a war. No, but that news segment airing next week might, Diane grinned. I heard from Tracy, who heard from Sam, who overheard Caroline telling Gregory that maybe it was time he stepped down as HOA president. Really? Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. Apparently she's tired of being married to the most hated man in Sunnyside Estates. Diane's impression of Caroline's affected accent was spot on. Eleanor laughed and grew more serious. You know, I didn't do this just for revenge. I know, Diane nodded, though that part was pretty satisfying to watch. It's about fairness. Rules should protect people, not punish them arbitrarily. If we're going to have an HOA, it should serve the community, not just the egos of whoever's in charge. They stood in companionable silence, watching the sunset paint Eleanor's soggy yard in shades of gold and amber. One final rubber duck floated in a puddle near where the pool had been, somehow overlooked in the cleanup. Eleanor walked over and picked it up. Keep him a trophy? Diane asked. Eleanor turned the small yellow duck over in her hand, thinking, maybe. Or maybe I'll put it on Gregory's porch with a note. What would the note say? Eleanor smiled, a glint of mischief returning to her eyes. Just a friendly reminder, don't duck with me. As if on cue, her phone buzzed with an email notification. She glanced down to see a message from the HOA with the subject line, Notice of violation, unauthorized lawn flooding and excessive decorative items. Eleanor and Diane looked at each other for a beat, then burst into laughter that echoed across the neighborhood. The battle might be over, but the war for Sunnyside Estates had only just begun, and Eleanor Prout was just getting started.